I owe my career to Professor Mahmoud Fathalla, like countless other health and social care professionals, public health experts, maternal and women's rights advocates, politicians, and all who care about the health of mothers and babies. My life changed when I first heard him speak, read his work, and watch his iconic 1980s film, Why Didn't Mrs. X Die? Professor Fathalla is a prophet, a visionary, and a savior to mankind. These are not my words. These are the words of Professor Gwyneth Lewis, the professor at University College London and the National Clinic Director for Maternal Health and Maternity Services for the Department of Health of the UK. In so saying, she was reiterating the feelings of many of us who are disciples of Professor Fathalla and who along the years have been following his footsteps, this really towering giant. Professor Fathalla was born in Abu Hamad in Sharqiya, Governorate in Egypt. He received his MBCHB, his DGO, his DS, and the doctorate in obstetrics and gynecology from Cairo University. Subsequently, he traveled to Scotland, where he received his PhD from the University of Edinburgh. Now, following this PhD, he published this interesting paper, important paper in Lancet in 1971, where he presented his theory of incessant ovulation, and whether it is a factor in ovarian neoplasm, suggesting that the increased risk of ovarian cancer among infertile women may be due to the incessant ovulation, whereby the ovarian cortex is continuously being bombarded by monthly ovulations without any rest due to pregnancy or lactation. Professor Fathalla then went back to Asyut, where he worked as a demonstration assistant lecturer, associate professor, and in 1995 he retired and became an emeritus professor in the same department. In 1978, he was elected as the dean of the medical school of Asyut University. Professor Fathalla is the father of laparoscopy in Egypt. He was responsible for the Johns Hopkins Program for International Education in Obstetrics and Gynecology, shortly known as JOPIGO, where many of the junior gynecologists at that time trained on the then new technique of laparoscopy. But more importantly, he was interested in alleviating maternal mortality. When he came to the scene, every day, about 1,800 women died from preventable causes related to pregnancy and labor, more than 250,000 per year. And 99% of these maternal deaths were in developing countries. He observed that maternal mortality was higher in rural areas and among the poorest communities. And he also observed that maternal health was very much related to newborn health, and that more than 3 million newly born die every year, in addition to 2.6 million stillbirths. And this was the map at that time. For him, this was not a health issue. It was more than a health issue. It was also a social injustice issue. And these were the causes of maternal mortality, as we knew them then. He was the first to talk about reproductive rights, and he always observed his motto that a woman is not just a womb. A motto is a human being with all aspects of humanity. She has a womb. A woman is not a womb. A woman has a womb. He defended his points of views and presented his points of views in the 1968 Tehran Proclamation, 1994 International Conference on Population Development, ICPD, and after that in the Beijing 4th World Congress of Conference on Women, 1995 in Beijing. And in 1994, as we can see here in the ICPD in Cairo, he is presenting his points of view, and we can see him here next to Al Gore, the Vice President of the United States of America then. Because of his staunch standing regarding reproductive rights, his ideas were taken by the WHO, which defined reproductive rights as we know them today. Subsequently, Professor Fathalla published this very important book on reproductive health and human rights with Rebecca Cook and Bernard Dickens of Toronto University, which was translated into French, Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, and other languages. He also made this film, this very interesting film, Why Did Mrs. X Die?, suggesting that women in poor countries do not only die because of health issues, it is also very much related to social injustice. This film was made in 1988 and WHO retold it in 2010. We can all watch it on YouTube. And his views were taken in the Millennium Development Goals, particularly goal number 3 and number 5, MDG3, promoting gender equality and empowering women, and MGD5, improving maternal health. And following these years of Millennium Development Goals, by the year 2015, most of the countries in the world had at least halved their maternal mortality ratio, as well as the neonatal and infant mortality rates. He worked with many world organizations, namely the World Health Organization, the WHO, where he worked for many programs as in his consultancy and advisory capacity, and more after that. At the end, he became the director of the special program for research, development, and research training in human reproduction, sponsored by UNDP, UNFPA, WHO, and the World Bank, which was the program responsible for sponsoring most of the research in human reproduction at that time. He also worked with the United Nations Population Fund in an advisory capacity, consultancy capacity, and he was a resource person for the preparation of the ICPD in Cairo in 1994 and the Hague Forum in 1999, and again in 2009 in Addis Ababa. He was a board member of many learned societies, the program Introduction of Adaptation of Contraception, International Women's Health Coalition, the Population Council, Johns Hopkins University, American Association for Gynecological Laparoscopies, Family Health International, in General Health, and he was also a senior advisor for the Rockefeller Foundation program for reproduction. And finally, a chairman of the advisory panel of IPPF. He has many more than 150 publications. Some of them are very landmark publications, like writing the first report, a word report on women's health following the ICPD in Cairo in 1994, and the FIGO Manual of Human Reproduction, published in 2004. He also worked very much with the FIGO, the International Federation of Gynecology Obstetrics. He was a member of the executive board since 1978-76 and moved along the years in different committees, task forces, alliances, scientific programs, and finally he became the president of FIGO in 1994 until 1997. He was honored by many learned societies, namely the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, which awarded him its honorary fellowship, and also in 1985, but also by the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, where he became a fellow at Oindem, and as you can see him here, receiving his honorary FRCOG from Sir George Pinker, the president of the college at that time. Other awards included honorary fellowship of the Faculty of Family Planning, the Gynecological Obstetrical Societies of Hungary, India, Brazil, the Edinburgh, the San Dogramacci Family Health, WHO, the Gold Medal of Asyut University, Outstanding Achievement Award of FIGO, Population Pioneer from the President of Egypt, President Mubarak in 2008. Other awards and honorary fellowships are too many to count. He was honored by organizations in Egypt, United States, Ghana, Indonesia, Bangladesh, India, China, and others. He received 4 honorary doctorates from Uppsala University in Sweden in 1991, from Helsinki University in 1999, for Toronto University in 2001, and from Hasselt University in Belgium in 2011, as we can see in these different pictures. And after that, he received the United Nations Population Award in 2009. This award is usually given to societies, but for the first time, it was given to Professor Fathalla by nobody other than Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations, as we can see here, and who said at that time in his introduction that Dr. Fathalla has shown how science, academics, and advocacy can come together to help the women of the world. He richly deserves the UN Population Award. As said, Professor Fathalla had many publications, but he also published many books. This very important book, published in 1997, From Obstetrics and Gynecology to Women's Health, as said, he had always advocated that it is not a matter of treating obstetrics and gynecology. It was much more than this. It was the woman's health in general. In fact, he changed the name of the department in a suit from obstetrics and gynecology to Department of Women's Health. Other publications included publications on family planning, a practical guide for health researchers published by the Eastern Mediterranean Office of WHO, EMRO, in English, then translated in Arabic, and many of the researchers in this part of the world have read this and made it their Bible towards their research work. For all this, Professor Fathalla was always admired and praised by all of us workers in the field of obstetrics and gynecology and women's health in general. As you can see here, this is Richard Houghton, the editor of The Lancet, following a conference in Arusha, the Global Maternity Health Conference, saying that Mahmoud Fathalla raised his audience to its feet and reduced many to tears last week as he closed the Global Maternal Health Conference in Arusha, Tanzania. The audience rose, united in respect and admiration for this man, the grandfather of maternal mortality. On a personal level, I was very lucky to have met Professor Fathalla first in 1987 in a FIGO-related conference in Montevideo in Uruguay. But more recently, in 2006, I was asked by Mrs. Susan Mubarak, First Lady of Egypt, to establish a center for women's health in these premises previously occupied by the Eastern Mediterranean Regional Office of WHO EMRO. I naturally turned to Professor Fathalla. Professor Fathalla told me there is no women's health without women's development. This center must be called the Center for Women's Health and Development, and this is what it was called. I had asked him to give us the keynote lecture in the inauguration conference of the center, and I had asked him to talk about his landmark paper, Reproductive Rights and Reproductive Wrongs. But he said, no, I will talk about something else. I have a new book, and I will summarize it in this talk. The book, entitled Reproductive Health and Human Rights, first published by Asyut University, but because it was a beautiful book, it was taken by IPPF, who published it in a larger edition and was distributed all over the world. In this copy, of which Professor Fathalla was very kind to give me a signed copy, he expressed his views and his experience in women's reproductive health issues, including the missing females, the assault on the clitoris, fertility by choice, not by chance, victimization, violence against women, feminization of aging, the menopause, and so on. And finally, his prescription for women's health, which is, of course, empowerment. I must confess here that this has made the roadmap of the Alexandria Regional Center for Women's Health and Development, and that all the activities from 2007 to 2011 were following the footsteps of this towering figure. And obviously, he was the Egyptian representative on the Board of Trustees of the Alexandria Regional Center of Women's Health and Development, seen here with Mrs. Susan Mubarak, the chair, and other towering figures like Professor Stuart Campbell, the godfather of ultrasound, Professor David Bartlett, Professor of Oxford, Professor Bernard Edon, the head of the IPPF, and other important members of the Board of Trustees. In November of 2019, after he was elected as chair of the Egyptian Representative Committee of the Royal College in Egypt, we had decided to celebrate the International Day on Combating Violence Against Women in the presence of the president of the college at that time, Professor Dame Leslie Reagan. Professor Fathalla came when she asked him to come, and he came to the Library of Alexandria and gave another one of his landmark lectures. And as you can see him here, mesmerizing the audience in the presence of Professor Leslie Reagan and also Professor Janice Reimer, the vice president of the college at that time. And as you can see here, he did not only give the talk, but he was very much involved in the discussions which followed this interesting day. More recently, we had decided to celebrate the International Women's Day in Cairo on the 8th of March 2022 in the presence of the new president of the Royal College, Professor Edis Morris. And as you can see, Professor Fathalla, we invited him, of course, but unfortunately he could not come. He very kindly sent me his lecture to be read on his behalf, and I had the great honor and privilege of presenting his talk to the audience. He had also sent us introductory video which was presented and which you can see also on YouTube. But unfortunately, on the 10th of November in 2023, Professor Fathalla passed away during his sleep at his hometown in Asyut. With this, we lost a towering figure, a real legend in our specialty of women's health. He was an exceptional visionary, a great teacher, a world expert obstetrician, an eminent scientist, an eloquent orator, and the godfather of alleviating maternal mortality. May his soul rest in peace, and may his memory be a blessing to all of us. Professor Mahmoud Fathalla, 1935-2023.